Hey, what's up, Liron here. Today I want to answer a question for you. How should you paint? In what order? Do you go from light to dark, trying to merge as many areas as you want, or do you kind of paint each section separately? The answer is, of course, you can choose, and it's very subjective and will vary based on the process, the subject, and so on. But I want to briefly go over these two processes and show you how both ways are working and are a good solution. So either going from light to dark, covering everything and skipping every time you skip the highlights or the lighter layer, or you can just paint section by section by section. It will end up looking really cool. So let's get to it. So the first approach I'm going to show you is the painting it in one go as much as possible and merging as many shapes as you can. The basic technique behind this is simply avoiding the lightest value you want to leave behind. So in this example, I left a couple of highlights on the roof of the car, on the sides, and I'm painting everything but that. And again, this video is following a question I got on this topic of which way is better, and I really want to show you how both can be applied to just about any subject, but it is a matter of personal taste and how you like approaching it. So now you saw the first wash, and I basically left the highlights behind. For the next wash, I'm just going to go over the next darkest layer, which is the body of the car itself. For example, the foliage behind it is darker, so I'm not touching any of that. Now, when you do this, you work in a consolidated shape. So you see I bunched everything together and I'm just painting it from top to bottom. And that's how I'll usually do it. Now, generally speaking, this approach is great for scenes, things that are a little more large scale, I would say, where lots of editing and simplification is required. It's just easier to paint a couple of washes, and all you have to think about really is skipping the highlights. Now, some advantages to this approach is that it's a bit more straightforward, kind of repetitive. You do the same thing with every wash. It does have more connectivity, and you can really see this in the shape of the car now. Everything is connected and merged together, so if you like flow, if you like that kind of a thing, this approach is really good for that. And again, you only have to kind of watch the highlights, and that's it. Now, the disadvantages are that if you're not as trained in this kind of a thing and really carefully rendering what you see, it can be a bit of a challenge to paint around the highlights, especially when it's a very large scene and there's lots of highlights, and it can be a little confusing. So that's one disadvantage. Another one is that you got to keep the wash wet. That's a part of the skipping the highlights and that challenge. You have to really make sure that that things stay wet so that you do get even washes, and that's where a lot of people have trouble with it. So that's kind of to sum up this approach, and you see me here now adding the background, just beautiful. That's kind of the next value of dark. So I'm painting everything that is as dark, skipping everything that's lighter. I love that moment when you put the foliage and the car kind of pops. It really is a beautiful effect. Adding that shadow for the sidewalk. And the next step will be to do the same for the car. So you see under the windows, there's this nice little smaller shadows that really indicate where parts are beveled or dented inwards. And I love when, as soon as you put these details in, immediately things pop. Now, I treat this stage as also compositional means. So it's not only darkening what needs to be darkened, I also have a lot of freedom to decide, okay, so I want to darken this, but not as much as the reference photo, because I want to divert attention from this area to a more important area. I hope that makes sense. And here we are done with the first process. I will show you the final result later on, remove the tape and everything. For now, let's move on to the next one, and that is approach number 2. And that is simply to put the right value in the right place. And that's it. This is great for when you have fewer single objects. So whether you're painting just one car, like in this example, or you're painting a still life or a portrait, because you're rendering one shape. And the beautiful part about this approach is, one of the major advantages is that it really has less pressure, because you're working in sections, and every time you focus on one shape. So to me, one shape was the windows of the car, another one is the shadow for its lower part, then it's the tires and the shadow under the car, and all you have to worry about is that one specific shape you're working on. So it does remove a lot of the pressure of having to keep the wash wet and all of that stuff that we've just seen in the previous approach. It also allows and kind of trains you to render more complex shapes, which is great.
you really have to think about, okay, how is this shadow related to the shape of the object I'm painting, and why does it look that way? Why is there a sharp contrast here, or why is there a weaker contrast there? You have more freedom to notice these things because you're not doing big washes that are kind of overarching all over the painting. It has that kind of a more straightforward in terms of the technique and less time pressure. The disadvantages is that it can look a little more fragmented because you're painting in parts, less connectivity, and it is more time consuming, which is important to say. If you simplify things on the layer level, so you paint everything but the highlights, but you connect everything together, it is a faster process. And it is important to mention that, especially if you're doing plein air, you're more limited in time. It really is important to note that there is this difference, right? Now, you don't have to stick to one approach only. You can also take a hybrid approach. For some areas, you will merge a lot of shapes, and for others, maybe you'll keep them separate. So it's not exclusive. You don't have to use just one. Okay, now I'm giving you a real quick view of the tape removal for the first example and for the second example. And then I'm going to show you the final result without the tape. I think it looks really good. And let's take a more zoomed in look at them too. I think it really is fun seeing the nuances of the shapes and the colors. And I just love both results. Overall, just you got to choose one on a basis of the result you're trying to achieve. I hope that was helpful. Let's wrap it up.
So thank you so much for watching. I really do hope you enjoyed this one and hope you enjoyed seeing these two processes. One of the things I really dislike about this one in particular is that saturation of red, that a lot of it was lost, and I do plan on learning how to better solve this kind of a thing. It's a very common issue in my work, and I do love the subtlety in the value in the colors, that they aren't too bright, but I do feel like sometimes you need a stronger focal point to really pull the viewer, especially where the red is supposed to shine stronger. It could be an interesting experiment to go over these areas with maybe even acrylics and seeing if I can bring out that brightness while not compromising on the darkness of the shadows. But in any case, I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope you really it got you thinking in, if I want to paint a subject, I can do both ways, and it's up to me to decide which way will work better for the case in question. It really is subjective. Try tackling the same subject in both ways and see what works best for you and what you enjoy the most. Hopefully by now I've proved to you that both ways are possible, not only in this video, but in previous ones, live streams too. But in any case, I hope you enjoyed this one. Leave a like if you have. It really helps the video reach more people. Let me know your thoughts in a comment, and if you still haven't subscribed, make sure you do, and hit the bell for notifications to know whenever I go live. Thank you so much. We'll see you again real soon.